This is episode 32 with founder of the T-Shirt University, Unique Walker. Hello and welcome to an episode of the UV Effect podcast. My name is Gabrielle Jordan and thank you for joining me. Today, our guest has a very interesting story and a very inspiring story that I'm very, very excited for you guys to hear. Her name is Unique Walker and she started off her life not easy. In this episode, she tells us about how she began, where she came from, where her beginnings were, and she also tells us about the roughest moments in her life, specifically where she had, there was a point where she had a lot. She had a husband and she had wonderful expensive clothes and she had money, and then one day she didn't because her husband was incarcerated and she was left almost homeless. And this story is very scary, but what she tells in this interview is inspiring. She talks about how in order to pick herself up, in order to, get the money that she needed to survive, she started an online internet company called the T-Shirt University, where she sold her T-shirts and she made a good amount of money from it. It actually was a very thriving company and it helped her to boost herself up and to make a living. And now she focuses mostly on leveraging the internet to share her blueprint with other women, her blueprint of how to use the internet, use e-commerce in order to grow a successful business and a successful life. I love this story mostly because it works, especially for now and as it's a Women's History Month. And it's very inspiring to women to show that, women are very resourceful, women are very smart, and often women are portrayed as weak. And they're not. They're very smart. And this story explains that all. When you're left with nothing, we're still able to find something. And we're not just something, but everything that we need. And that's incredible. And so Unique Walker is a very inspiring woman. And her story is very inspiring as well. And she focuses day and day to bring that inspiration to other women that can also inspire others as well. It's a wonderful circle of women power, and I love it. So I'm very excited again for you guys to get into this interview, and I hope that you enjoy. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview with Miss Unique Walker. Welcome, Miss Unique. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I have been doing a bit of research on your story when we first connected, and I wanted to kind of see what you were about and what your story was all about. And when I read it, I was like, wow. First of all, you've gone through your fair share of struggles, and you've really made diamonds out of it, honestly, diamonds out of coal, and it's really fantastic. So I'm excited for my audience to hear your story and to hear your lessons that you brought out, and also learning how you used your gifts as almost like strength for you, as fuel for you in order to push forward and to move forward and to make something out of your life, even though things were seemingly falling apart. I think it's fantastic. So, yeah, of course. So I want to start off with the beginning of your life. You did go through quite a bit in the beginning, so I want you to tell us about how things were when you were starting off, when you were younger, and just kind of tell us what you did as you went from that beginning stage of your life, going through what you went through, and how you kind of moved forward, if that makes sense.
Well, so when I was 11, both of my parents passed away 5 months apart. Right. And that was the most memorable experience in terms of, challenges and tragedies as a little girl, obviously. And so I was raised by my father's sister, who is my mother. She's very much so my mother to this day. I was raised by her. And so as a young girl, losing both parents 5 months apart from each other, you're like, you don't even know that could happen. Mm-hmm. You don't even know that, one, you could lose, that little kids lose their parents, and that they could possibly lose two parents. Mm-hmm. However, for me, I believe as an adult, I have learned that, what the enemy meant for evil, God turns around for our good. Mm-hmm. And so being raised by my aunt, who is my mother, gave me structure, gave me values, and actually, as I'm 39, as a 39-year-old woman, I can see how, and this may freak some people out, but I could see how God used my parents, protected me and my parents passing away, because I don't know that they would have been able to develop the woman that God had called me to be. And so that's a very tough pill to swallow as a woman. Think now as a woman and as a mother that possibly, not that they died because of that, but how God used it, because my aunt, who is my mother, was very structured. She was a different type of mother. She didn't have, any substance issues or anything like that. And it wasn't that my biological mother wasn't a good mother. But when I think about the woman that I am today, I know that that's because my aunt, my mother, my other mother, that it was because, God had placed me and my sister in her hands.
I think to be so conscious of that is really incredible. Like you said, that is a tough pill to swallow. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people that just heard that, like, whoa, really? Wow. That's something crazy to say. But I understand, like, where you're coming from there. And then also to be able to realize that, that takes a lot of awareness. And that takes a lot of, like, I guess, peace to be able to come to that conclusion, that idea, and that you're grateful, not so much that your parents have passed away, but for the experience of being able to be raised by a woman that was able to bring you up to be who you are.
Absolutely.
So through that, I'm guessing that's kind of one of the biggest things that you learned, specifically through that struggle of losing your parents very early on. You learned about even just kind of being grateful, I'm sure, being grateful for what you have and what you were able to have, even through that sadness. But what other, what's one of the main nuggets that you pulled from your beginning life experiences? One of the things that you keep with you to this day that you've learned?
That trouble doesn't last always. And that for every bad time in your life, that that feeling that you felt on the first day or the second day or even the next week is not a feeling that you will feel forever. And so for me, I remember, when my aunt and my uncle came to say that my mother had passed away. And then 5 months later, I remember my aunt taking me and my sister to my grandmother's house, because my father was her brother. Even though she had lost her brother, she had to hold herself up to get me and my sister across town to her mother's house, which was my grandmother, to break the news that my father had passed away. And so I remember those first initial feelings as a little girl. And I remember what it felt like the next week. And then over time, that trouble did not last always. So as an adult, I knew that no matter what I faced, that these days are going to change. That if I just get through today, that these days are going to change, and that trouble is not going to, follow me always.
And that's such a powerful thing to hold on to, because, we always need like some kind of anchor, some kind of way to, like, of course, you're being a Christian. I'm also a Christian. So that's like the main anchor, of course, God. But also that kind of being human, we also need that physical anchor, that physical thing that we can like really, like, really just kind of go back to when we're like confused and when we feel misunderstood. And like, I love that, that understanding that trouble doesn't last always. I love that. And I think that's something that does need to be remembered, to be reminded that, and also that trouble often is a teaching moment. It's there to push you and put you to the next level, which brings me to my next question. Okay. Well, actually, future question. I'll come back to that one, actually. So I do want to talk about where you went from, of course, being young and moving up as you got older, how you utilized your life and what you did with your life. So you talked about how you talked about before, as I was doing a little bit of research on you, how leadership, entrepreneurship, specifically leadership was something that you were really born with, like you just kind of, that just came so naturally for you. And then entrepreneurship just kind of followed it and was something else that really you were able to fall into and really get a grasp of. And you were actually very, very talented at it. In fact, you and your husband owned several brick and mortars and did very well for yourself in your businesses. Can you tell us what your first business was first? I do want to know what that was. So
my first business was Unique Home Healthcare. where when I came out of high school, I went to nursing school, and I realized that I did not want to be in that atmosphere every day. And so at 21, I started Unique Home Healthcare, where I started an agency that staffed nannies, nurses, and, like nursing assistants for elderly people as well as special needs children.
That's awesome. And I love your name. I mean, I know we probably hear this a lot, but your name just works so well for any business.
Your name is the word.
Right.
Not that all names aren't words, but it's like a real word.
Yeah. And it works though. Like you can use for the name of your company. You said it was. Can you say it again? Unique home. Was it insurance? What was it?
Unique Home Healthcare.
Healthcare. Sorry, my bad. But yeah, it just works so well because unique. I like that. Automatically attracted to that. But yeah, okay, interesting. So that was your first business, and then you went on to with your husband to do several brick and mortars. What kind of businesses did you own with your husband?
Food industry. So we had a deli and an eatery. So MLK Deli and the Oh So Good Eatery were two brick and mortar locations that we established together. My husband had one of the stores as a variety store, and then he and I worked together to change it to an eatery later on. And then MLK Deli had been in my family for 25 years at that time. And I had the opportunity to take it over and run that as well, even though we had never really been in food industry. One of the gifts that God has given me is the ability to recreate myself. In terms of different seasons, I'm able to use whatever it is that I'm going through or just what I've been exposed to. I've been able to use my exposure to operate in business. I believe that exposure is extremely important when you are operating in any business.
So you mean by I just want some clarification. So you mean that you you are able to kind of pull from what you've learned, or are you able to kind of like put yourself into what you're working on? What specific?
I'm able to use what I've learned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm able to use what I learned. And so for Unique Home Healthcare, I was in nursing school and realized, I don't have to actually get a job to do this. I could actually, start a business and staff people doing this. And then when my husband had a variety store and I changed it around to the Oh So Good Eatery, then my family, my uncle who owned the other store was like, hey, you need to take over this store too because you did such a great job. But it was because I had been exposed. As a young girl, one of my first jobs was working at a soul food restaurant called Levi's Barbecue. Mm-hmm. I think they've closed down now. Mr. Levi passed away. But that company exposed me to food industry as well as entrepreneurship. So I've always been able to go back to a time in my life for something that I have been exposed to and used it right where I was at that time.
That is fantastic because I guess I'm a supporter of the idea that you should always pull from what you've learned before and figure out how you can implement it into whatever situation you're going through. I believe that almost everything that you've gone through in your life, depending on how old you are, there's something that you can pull from and apply to whatever struggle or to apply to whatever challenge or just to whatever part or place that you are in your life right now. And so I love that you that's something that comes very naturally to you, just being able to pull from what you've learned in the past and then being able to implement it in different ways. It's so important. I would say it's so important to be able to look back and be able to kind of clarify and be aware of everything that you've gone through and then being able to place it in the parts of your life where it's necessary. Because I think so many people, that's why I think I agree with you when you say it's a gift, because very little people really know how to do that or why that's even important. Can you expand on that a bit more? Because I think that's a really important topic.
Well, I believe that we get to go through life. We start off in our life, and I believe that life is about decisions and the decisions that we make, good or bad, because you can also pull from the challenging seasons in your life or the mistakes that you have made in your life. But I believe that it's about mindset. Because there are some people that could have gone through the same things that I have been through in childhood, in adulthood, or just even business mistakes, and it would make them say, I'm never going to do this again.
Right.
So I believe that exposure helps to develop a mindset. And I also believe that you should try your best to get around people that are positive, that won't allow you to stay in, those challenging times, but that will actually say, hey, you know what? You could actually use that. Because I think about the last 5 years of my life, how every single thing that I had ever been through I have been able to use for this season in my life. And so I really want to encourage people to, people always say, oh, your circle, the people that you're around and that kind of thing. And so I believe that if you have the proper mindset, you could position that properly because, you could decide that, oh, I just want to be with the popular crowd. But popular doesn't always mean purpose. Or you could decide that, you know what, I need a mentor. I need a business coach. I need someone who I could really sit down and talk to, and I can tell them what my story is, and they can actually help me to develop and use those things. So I believe that just exposing yourself, even for myself, I will take myself to college through a book. I'm an avid reader. I can't tell you how many Audible books that I have. God has opened up some new doors for me. And the first thing I'm like is, I need a mentor in this area, and I need to find out a book and who can coach me.
I like it. I love that. And I really love the word that you keep using is exposure. I really love that word because I feel like it has a somewhat positive connotation to it, in the sense that, like, if you would say, some people would say, like, I went through this really bad experience, or like, I went through this challenge. Well, others, like someone like you would say, I was exposed to this bad experience. I was exposed to this challenge. And for me, when I hear something like that, it gives this idea that you're not, like, complaining about it. You're not sad about it. You are actually quite happy that you were able to receive this moment, and you're using that to, now you're going to be able to use that. You're not thinking of it like a negative experience so much. You're also thinking of it as a positive experience, or a way that you can change an experience that you're in now to a positive experience. I really love that word, exposure, and that's really, I think I never really thought of it in that way, and to be able to apply it and implement it in your life, and not so much just thinking about every experience as like just strictly positive or strictly negative, but rather it's something that can be used to make something positive or negative.
Absolutely.
And I love
that.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I believe that everything is supposed to be used. I think about, I started doing some juicing, and I realized that, okay, every piece of fruit, every piece of vegetable, even the parts that we deem to be things that we should expose of, are actually the most nutrient parts. I bought a Vitamix blender a couple of years ago, and I had a nutritionist, and she told me that the stem on the apple had so many nutrients and fiber, just as much as meaning the core of the apple had just as many, nutrients as the skin and the inner of it. And so when I think about the fact that the core of things, what develops our core is a lot of times our past. It's the things that have, really built us up. It's what was used to create whoever you are is the core. And so when I think about when I was juicing and she was showing me, and the things that I was throwing away were the very things that were more potent, for my drink. And so I always tell women, it's the very thing that you are ashamed of, embarrassed of, the things that you don't want people to even know about are the things that make you human and will connect your heartstrings to the people that you are called to.
And that example of the apple is so befitting, because you think of it in the way, too, where the apple is surrounded by, well, you said that the things that make up who we are, it's a part of our experiences. And I think that with specifically an apple, everything that surrounds the core is almost like you. That's who you are, in a sense. And then everything around the core is your experiences, your struggles. You have the bruising on the apple sometimes, those struggles. But what happens is that it actually, all that forming around it also provides the nutrients inside. So you're getting all these experiences around you, and it just helps to fuel you. So I love that experience, that idea of an apple, because I think that really, that aligns with me. I really agree. That gave me a new way of looking at, a different perspective of looking at like who we are as people as well as fruit. But but I love that. I love that. Can you tell me? I mean, you basically really did answer that question I was gonna ask next, because you said that one of your gifts was being able to take your exposure and then implement it in your life. But what else, or why do you think that entrepreneurship and leadership were something that really came so naturally to you? Why do you think it was something that just kind of you were able to be attracted to and you were able to really utilize fairly, I wouldn't say easily, but be able to do that with easier than other people might be able to?
Yeah. Once again, the word exposure comes back up, because as a young girl, I was exposed to one of my aunts. She basically owned our whole street. I lived in D.C., and she owned several houses on the block, and she used to have people that struggled with mental illness. And there were like maybe 6, 7 houses. And then she had one house where they all would come to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, and to get their meds. And she was much older. She had to be in her 60s back then, and I was a little girl. But I was amazed at how she was this Black woman, powerful. She had all of these people that she was in control over, plus properties, and she was getting up every single day working for herself. But not only was she working for herself, I always tell the people that I work with that being an entrepreneur makes you a leader and an influencer if you properly leverage and position it. But her exposing me to the fact that she had to lead a team, she was in charge of multiple mortgages, and that she was working for herself gave me the exposure, once again, that I needed when I felt like, oh, there's this, I can actually be an entrepreneur. That's what Aunt Frances did, And so I believe, once again, for me, once I realized that there was something that I could share, that there was something that there were a group of people that I was called to, whether it be in business or in leadership, I looked back on the exposure of how Aunt Frances led this team, And so for me, even when I was 22, I had a staff of maybe 10 people that were much older than me, but I had to lead them at 22. And that's why I was so happy to do this interview, because I know that, one, you're a young entrepreneur, and that you have already grabbed a hold of the fact that I am a leader. And so this interview was very, great and important to me, because it reminds me of even myself at that young age, where even in high school, I was a part of a group called Expressions, which was like Rites of Passage. I was the vice president. I was always very involved. I've always been able to just lead. But understanding that an entrepreneur and leadership doesn't make you a boss. I have a real problem with the word boss. And boss chicks. And I used to think that I was one. Until I realized that bosses are disposable. They have to retire, and that, they can be replaced. But that a leader leaves a legacy. And regardless of what, if I'm a leader, I'm building another leader, I will never perish. Because there is always someone like me today. Aunt Frances I'm 39. She has been passed away since I was a child. And 39 years later, I am still referencing Aunt Frances.
Right.
That means that she wasn't a boss. She was a leader. Because even now, in this day, I can say that because of Aunt Frances, I knew that this was possible. So that means what? She never died.
Yeah. I love that way of looking at it. That is so impactful, I think. Because, people really do want to be like that boss, like, oh yeah, I'm the boss, I'm the one making all the dough, I'm the one, in charge of everything and everyone. But that idea of looking at yourself, or working to be not just a boss but a leader, It's that idea that you don't just want to be here while you're alive. You want to be here for generations and generations, and you want to inspire others to do the same. You want to inspire others to be leaders and leave legacies as well. And so this is a continuous legacy that goes on between generations and through generations. That is so powerful. And I think that, people, especially when you're younger, especially when you're younger, or if you have a young mindset. So I'm talking about even if you're old and you have a young mindset, it's always that idea that, you have to be rich and you have to be famous in order to make an impact, where there are so many people that, and actually this reference to one of the interviews I did done recently with Ronnie B. And she talked about...
I know her well. That's a friend of mine.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So she actually talked about how this idea of how it's important to know that you don't always have to be the astronaut that goes up in space. Sometimes you can be the person that, like NASA, you can be the NASA, the one that teaches and puts that first man on the moon, right? So that idea that, for her, your aunt, like she was a leader because she left a legacy, and she helped you to understand that you could do what she did, and that you could grow and be successful and do your own thing. And that, I think that's more important than just making a lot of money. And that's more important than just being that boss. Being a leader is so much more important. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Thank you.
So now I want to transition to another difficult part in your life, but also the part of your life that really molded where you are now and allowed you to really shoot up and become so strong and be able to achieve a lot of things that you've achieved at this point in your life. So you ended up going through quite a world shift, I guess. Like everything kind of turned around, and it was, I guess I would think, pretty surprising when you for a while, you were doing well with your businesses. You were having, designer shoes in your closet. You were doing well. And then next minute, you were, losing your husband to incarceration and then owing more money than you could afford. Right. I want to know, okay, what was that? Can you tell us about what happened there? And then also tell us how you were able to push through. What made you think, what made you think that you could actually move forward? Because I think that's a question that people might be like, if I went through that, I don't know what I would do. I don't think I could do anything else. Right. What made you think you could?
Well, in 2012, my husband was sentenced to a federal prison term. And my husband is my high school sweetheart. And so I had not experienced adult life without my husband. And we have 2 children. And so when he went away in 2012, once again, I used my pain for purpose. And I created Bibles over bags because I had all of this access. I had a bunch of material things and shoes and $60,000 in Chanel purses and all of these different things, and there was no husband, no father there for my children. And so when he went away, everything went with him. The store went with him. Just everything that we had built just pretty much went with him. And so I had my 2 children. At the time, my oldest son was 13 and 5. They're now 18. My son is in college, and my 5-year-old at that time is 10. And so I realized that either I was going to crumble or I was going to look in the eyes of my children and just strap my boots up again and come back out. Right. And so my why became big enough, and so I found my how. My why was my father died in prison. My little brother is in prison right now. My oldest brother was murdered in the streets. And my husband is in prison, and I have 2 sons. And so either I'm going to wallow in this, or I'm going to strap my boots up and make sure that my son is on a college campus and not in a prison. Right. And that why became big enough for me to figure out how I was going to do this. And so I also opened myself up to a mentor, to a coach. And I will always say a mentor and a coach because sometimes you have it in you. Well, we always have it in us. But there are times that God will literally use mentorship and coaches to help to bring out of you what's already laying really dormant. Absolutely. And so for me, my children were the reason why. I started off just selling t-shirts. I knew that I had this knack for entrepreneurship. I had to learn how to leverage the internet because that was new. And the internet, if used properly, I mean, could either kill you, literally, or you could build something that is so stable that the quicksand that you built the last stuff on will just go away and you can build on a solid foundation. And so for me, once again, I found myself in the valley. But God literally used that season to build the unique Walker that we know today. My past years of entrepreneurship, there wasn't the internet. We didn't really know what was going on amongst each other unless we told each other, because you couldn't see what people were doing in business or what they had going on because we didn't have a platform, the internet, to be able to do that. Right. Well, now you're doing business and you're leveraging the internet and everyone can see it. And so for me, I used my faith in God and the fact that I knew that I lost my parents and today I don't cry about that. Yeah. Not that I don't miss them, but that was a sign to me that this is not going to last always. Yeah. So I knew that I could focus on today, not worry about tomorrow, and just build one brick at a time. And that's what I did.
That is all of what you said. is so important. I'll touch on the mentorship piece because I'm a strong believer in the importance of mentorship. Mm-hmm. I have lots and lots of mentors, like for almost every aspect of what I do in my life, and so I definitely agree with the idea that mentors are put in your life to help you to see things that you don't necessarily see, that you already have within you, but you just need someone else, a different point of view, a different perspective to help you pull that out and help you recognize that yourself. And especially going through what you went through, having someone there, just being able to rely on someone else that could see strength in you where maybe you didn't see strength in yourself at the moment. That's just so helpful. And that's just so, I think it's so important because we can't always be our own superheroes. You know, you sometimes need other people to come and just save us and help us, and that's okay. Yeah. But I love that point of mentorship and just being able to have role models and people to rely on and to trust in. I also really love the point where, I mean, that idea, right, for you, where your father died in prison, your brother was in prison, your other brother died on the streets, and now you have two sons. Like, honestly, I look at that and I'm like, wow, that'd be kind of terrifying for me just because I'm looking at like my past. And then I'm also looking at what I have right here and I'm like, okay, how can I shift that? And so I feel like for you, that really, it signifies your strength because you were able to look at your past and not be as, I guess you might have been a little fearful, I'm not sure. But but instead of being able to bask in your fear, you instead decided to teach your kids how to be different, how to be better, how to change their lives, and or at least how they don't have to be what, you know, the family once was. And I really I love that idea because people when they're faced with those kinds of decisions, those types of situations, they either do one or two things. They run, they fail, or they decide to pick up and they make things different for the future. You know, they change the future. They make it so that it's more beneficial. So I love that. And I love that that's what you decided to do. And I think that's just something that people do need to pull from, and at least like a reminder of that their past does not always dictate what the future might be. And even no matter how much it seems like it would.
Yeah, it's very true. Mm-hmm. I believe that we are not our circumstances. Yeah. We are not the things that naturally those things have helped to develop us. Mm-hmm. But once again, it all falls back on the mindset of the person. Yes. Because, you know, you have some people that have grown up in alcoholic homes and there were two children and one child will never touch alcohol and the other child became an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And so it just depends on how you decide. Yeah. And either you can decide one day or day one.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that so much. And like, especially in that sense that like, well, you were talking about before how you have this gift of being able to learn from your exposure. And I think a lot of people, they might have, like, especially hearing your story so far, or even like they might implement it in their own story, again, mindset. they might think that exposure means like, oh, what they went through might happen again, and now you just have to kind of learn from it, because it's going to happen again. It's inevitably going to happen again. Everything negative is going to happen again. I just have to learn from that. Whereas really exposure is about just learning from everything, and also learning how to make, the things that the ways that you made mistakes. You, instead of just giving up, you try it again a different way. You learn from the mistakes and you do it differently. And so that point of mindset is so key, because the way that you look at something, the perspective that you're looking at it, can really determine what you end up doing with whatever you have, whatever it is that you're looking at. I love that. So you've taken a lot of what you've learned in your life, and you've taken a lot, specifically on entrepreneurship, developing a new business, just using the internet and being able to grow and be able to support your family. You've taken your knowledge, you've taken what you've learned, your exposure, and have now become very passionate about sharing that with other women that maybe don't know, how to start their businesses, or how to start a business, or how to take their life from A to B or A to Z. You have started a t-shirt called the T-shirt University, where you teach other women how to start businesses online when it comes to selling t-shirts. And it's almost, you're teaching them a skill, which is fantastic. Can you tell us about, the t-shirt company, why, for you, why you decided to start it, and why it's so important for you to teach women about, leadership and also intricate aspects of entrepreneurship?
Well, the T-shirt University came because I always had people to ask, how did you get on MTV? How did you get on VH1? How did this celebrity or that celebrity end up with your brand? And so in working with a business coach, she said, why don't you package it up and sell it?
Yeah.
And a light bulb went off. I'm like, I could really do that? Yeah. She's like, yeah. And so I ended up packaging the T-shirt University. But it's the way that I decided to do it is very different, because it's the T-shirt University, but it's also AKA Purpose University. Because my blueprint, which I have another course called Share Your Blueprint, and I'll explain that to you later. My blueprint for the T-shirt University was to use the T-shirt as a billboard to spread a message of your cause, mission, purpose, or testimony. Always connecting a story to the billboard, which was a T-shirt. Mm-hmm. And so when women sign up for the class, they're always like, okay, I thought you were just going to tell me how to operate this business, but we actually tap into what's the message, what's your purpose. And so I wanted to make sure that I could help other women have a income that they were 100% in control over, that they could not, because remember in 2012, my husband and I were business partners and everything went with him, which means that our money went with him. Yeah. And I did not have an income that I was 100% in control over that I could provide for my children. Yeah. And so it put the fire under my feet that women need to have something that they cannot divorce from. Mm-hmm. They cannot be fired from, demoted from, that's something that cannot be taken away from them unless they just weren't faithful over it. Yeah. And so the T-shirt University was born. I have serviced over 600 women in the last year and a half at the T-shirt University, which opened the door up for me to become a Forbes business coach, as well as Share Your Blueprint. Share Your Blueprint is an online course and mentorship where I help women to share their intellectual properties, once again, intellectual properties, purpose, testimony with other people. Because, as Christians, we know that iron sharpens iron, and that a friend sharpens a friend, and that we all have supply for each other. And so I do something called community-based branding, where at the T-shirt University, as well as at Share Your Blueprint, we build communities and we serve them over selling to them. But by serving them, the customer automatically buys into the message, cause, mission, or purpose, and you are automatically selling to them.
That's fantastic. I think that it's a way that people may, and people do think about, oh yeah, what's my message, what's my mission, but I think it's something that people do need to look deeper into and realize why it is, why that's their message, why it's their purpose, because that's also what fuels a person to, keep pushing forward and to keep, growing their business. I love that that's the direction that you're going in. It's not just, about a business, it's about why you're starting this business. And especially now, because when it comes to marketing and branding, people are more interested in the person behind the product or service,
it's true.
over the product or service. They're more interested
People
in
don't buy people, they buy products.
Exactly, right. So, I think
people buy people, and they do not buy products.
Right, exactly.
Buy people in that product.
Exactly, exactly. And especially, again, like the social media as well, that's a huge component, because people really want to be able to connect with you, and then they'll decide, hey, maybe I'll buy your product as well. Yeah. But I think that is important, the way that you're teaching and the way that you're structuring. So definitely you'll have all the links to your website as well as your social media down below, so you guys can for sure check her out and check out what she's doing with the T-Shirt University, be a part of that in any way, learn about her, connect with her as well. And I want to say, I thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story. I think most likely, I would say, even because I'm looking in my own perspective, it inspired a lot of people. I'm just saying, I'm putting that out there because it inspired me. I'm sure that so many people that were listening to this were inspired by just what you were able to do with your life, and also just the idea that for you, when you tell your story, you seem to have this sense of like understanding and awareness about the aspects of what happened. You're not looking at it and then not basking in like, oh, how awful it was, and not staying in that place, but rather you're looking at all those different pieces and all those different aspects, and really, as you said, looking at what you were exposed to and pinpointing how you were able to learn from each and every experience. And that's something that's just an overall, a universal key to how people need to look at life, looking at it as exposure and looking at it as learning experiences. So I think that's like the biggest thing that I pulled from you, and I need to remind myself to do each and every day, and I absolutely love that. So before we go, I definitely want to give you a chance to share any other information that you would like to discuss before we head out.
I think we've pretty much covered it all. I just want to thank you again for allowing me on your podcast, and I'm super proud of you yourself. Thank you. And I'm just so happy to know that at a young age, I think that if we can grab girls young, then they don't have to go through, some of the things that we have gone through to realize that I actually can own this. Like, there is something special about me. The one message that I want to share is that there is no duplication of a human being. There may be another podcast, there may be another T-shirt university, someone who's teaching people about T-shirts. There may be someone else that is selling something that is identical to what you are doing, your products or service. But I want people to keep in mind that God did not create a duplication of you. And because there's no duplication of you, you don't have to worry about an industry being saturated, that you're not going to be able to do it, because the way that you're going to do it is tailored to who God created you to be. And the people that are going to follow you are going to be the people that you are born to serve anyway. And so I think that people need to just understand that, women especially, that there is no duplication of you, and that's your power.
That really does encapsulate the message of the UV effect, and I'm so glad that you added that in there. And I really, again, appreciate you being on the show and sharing your message and sharing that point, because, again, that's something that's just so important for people to remember. It can be very scary to go into whatever field you're going into and be fearful because you don't know if you're going to be able to stand out, but just to remember that you will stand out because you already are naturally special and naturally able to stand out if you do stay in tune with what makes you you, because no one else is like you. I love that so much, and thank you so much, Unique.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Miss Unique Walker. And if you did, and you're listening to this on my website, GabrielleJordanInspires.com/the UV Effect, be sure to scroll down and check out her information. You can find Unique Walker's website, social media, and ways of contacting her in order to get more information about her and possibly be inspired about her further. So be sure to check that out, as well as if you're on iTunes or my website, be sure to leave some comments letting us know how you're liking the episodes in this whole podcast, because I want to hear what you're thinking. I want to hear what you're liking, what you're enjoying. And also I want to make sure outside people that are thinking about watching the show, listening to the show, I want to make sure that they hear what you think about it as well. So be sure to leave a comment and also rate on iTunes. And finally, be sure to head over to Instagram and follow us at the UV Effect to check out some of the quotes we pulled from this episode, past guests and future guests, as well as some fun behind the scene clips. Again, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you around here next Tuesday. Bye.